Hey everybody, it's Adam Farkas. Welcome back to another edition of ODwire TV, and today is all about drops. And specifically, we're going to be speaking about SYSTANE COMPLETE preservative-free, or PF as they call it. Now, dry eye knowledge has come a long way since I first learned about dry eye. I guess it's, well over 30 years ago. We didn't know as much back then. There wasn't as much science, and back then, in the old times, as they used to say, a drop is a drop is a drop, but these days that is absolutely not the case. The science of dry eye has advanced and the drops themselves have advanced. So today, we are very fortunate to have an actual scientist with us here today, a person who has worked on these drops and can tell us all about the technology behind them and how you can use them in clinical practice. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Howard Ketelson to ODwire TV. Howard's the immediate past head of Ideation in dry eye and global vision at Alcon. He spent a majority of his career focused on ocular health innovation and the development of the SYSTANE portfolio of products. In partnership with Alcon R&D, he built on the discoveries and research of past and present Alcon scientists and explored new strategies and ideas for meeting unmet consumer and medical needs through the development of breakthrough formulations, packaging, and device technologies. Howard brings a passion and commitment to his work, and I'm so happy he was willing to spend some time with us here today. So Howard, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And so, I brought up a little bit about dry eye and how the science has advanced, and I just want to remind everyone sort of clinically why this is important, right? So just to quickly review, about 44 million adults in the US suffer from dry eye symptoms. The overall economic burden is about $55.4 billion annually. More importantly, these patients are already in many of our practices. So whether they're telling you that they have dry eye or not, they're there. And you want to try to help them as best you can. And in fact, many patients are probably even treating themselves, finding products, and they could definitely use some guidance. And Howard, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about SYSTANE and how it's evolved over the years. I know you've been intimately involved with the product, for a very long time, and you've been working closely with Don Korb as well, someone who I think most of our audience is familiar with, one of the pioneers of dry eye.
Yeah, when I started in Alcon in 2000, and really at that time there was very few differentiated products on the over-the-counter drops. However, I think when you go back and you look at the technology of SYSTANE, and when we started this work, it was in many ways revolutionary to dry eye drops. And the reason for that is just the delivery mechanism of getting ingredients on the eye in a unique way. And really, I was fortunate to work with some great scientists, engineers, manufacturing, and clinicians to start that work and bring the family of SYSTANE as we've seen over the years.
Right. Now you mentioned the word family, right? So what does that actually mean in reality to people? How are all the SYSTANE products kind of related to each other?
That's a good question, and it's a question that comes up often, because when you look at products in this category, everything seems to be similar. What we started with was a gelling technology that essentially cross-links in the eye as a reflection of pH. So essentially, it's a smart polymer system that, in combination with actives like polyethylene glycol, propylene glycol, you get a cross-linking mechanism to get a meshwork that forms on the ocular surface.
Right. Now, this technology is referred to as HP guar, right? People can see it behind me, and I'll actually put up a slide on the screen as well so they can take a close look. Maybe you could take us through what this is all about.
Yeah, HP guar, HP stands for hydroxypropyl, and guar is a galactomannan, it's a polysaccharide. And HP essentially allows the polymer to be easily dissolved, so it doesn't have any issues in terms of mixing. And the key part of this particular polymer is it has what is known as hydroxy groups called cis-diols. So it's in a particular configuration that allows the cross-linker, which is borate, as you've shown here, to actually undergo a cross-linking mechanism to essentially entangle the polymers so you get a meshwork-like formation.
Right. Now, SYSTANE itself is a liquid, right, in the bottle, but then when it touches the ocular surface, because of the pH, that's when it turns into a gel?
And you know, it's fascinating because, you know, when you think about if someone were to just take that solution in the bottle and put it on their fingertip, it is not even close to something that would be in the eye. So in the eye, of course, it forms this entangled polymer network, which forms a nice thin layer across the cornea. And literally, it is like a mesh network.
Right. So the tech is very advanced. You know, I said in the beginning, a drop is a drop is a drop was the old philosophy before people really understood dry eye. But I'm putting it up on the screen right now so people can get a sense of the timeline. Maybe you can walk us through, you know, as the science evolved. I guess this timeline covers about 20 years. You know, what happened? You know, what kind of science was happening in the background that made this all possible?
Yeah, I mean, some very important pivot points over the years. Of course, when SYSTANE Original was launched, that was all about aqueous deficiency. It was meant to be a differentiated product compared to the classic HPMCs, CMCs, which are more the classic lubricants out there. And when the first DEWS report came out, you know, we started to think about how do we incorporate improved retention properties, improved wetting, and SYSTANE Ultra was all about improving that hydration retention aspect of the formulation. Of course, you know, back in 2012, when really meibomian gland dysfunction really started to be more visible to the community of optometrists and ophthalmologists. Really at that time, you know, when you went to conferences like ARVO, there wasn't a lot of MGD work, and Alcon recognized, along with working with folks like Don Korb and others, that we needed to do something that would address meibomian gland dysfunction, or to at least try and do something that would provide lipid supplementation. And around that, you know, in that time, Dr. Korb had done tremendous work clinically with some lipids that do provide interesting what I would say is reinforcement of the tear film by improving tear film stability, tear film thickness. And from the learnings of Don Korb, we worked with him on developing SYSTANE Balance, which is a formulation that is the first formulation that is an emulsion. So it's an oil and water emulsion, which means that you have water as a continuous phase with oil droplets in it. And in those oil droplets and on the periphery of the droplets is a phospholipid called dimerystoyl phosphatidylglycerol, DMPG, which is a polar phospholipid. The DEWS-2 report came out, and, you know, obviously there's a tremendous amount of learning from that report. And one of the learnings was that, you know, polar phospholipids do contribute to tear film integrity. And we were fortunate that back in 2010, we had worked on SYSTANE Balance, launched it. And knowing that polar phospholipids are important for tear film reinforcement, integrity, replenishment, we did something really, I think, quite interesting in that we essentially transformed SYSTANE Balance using nanotechnology, where we were able to essentially reduce the droplet size to below 100 nanometers, which really is quite advantageous in terms of getting more product and what I call active product that's in the formulation to the eye. And that really set the stage, I think, for our product called SYSTANE Complete Multidose Preservative-Free, which is a unique bottle that prevents backflow and contamination. And, you know, that being said, just for everyone's, for context, you know, we also during this time had come up with a hyaluronic acid combination product called SYSTANE Hydration. And Sustain Hydration was a product we had done quite a bit of work on from a cellular level and doing experiments to define, could we have synergistic value with HP guar and hyaluronic acid, and Sustain Hydration was developed.
Right. And in fact, let's talk a little bit about these nano-sized lipid particles in Sustain Complete. I want to put up a picture to sort of illustrate what it is that you were talking about. Maybe you could walk us through how this actually works.
Yeah, when we started this work, it's, making emulsions is not easy. It's something that demands a lot of creativity and a lot of scientific excellence to come up with something that's stable in a bottle. And what we did at that time is we were working with high pressure homogenization technology, where essentially we're pressurizing a solution under extreme pressures. And from mixing and these high pressures, you're able to essentially power down the droplets into smaller droplets. And from that highly pressurized mechanical system, in combination with the polar phospholipid, you're able to get these nano-sized lipid droplets.
I think it's about half, or just a little more than half, of folks want a preservative-free option, right? And that's what a lot of doctors are recommending. And so I know you mentioned Sustain Complete PF before. Maybe you could just run through a little bit about the product in particular.
Yeah, I mean, the formulation is essentially the same, so there's no change in the force behind Complete, the nano droplet technology in combination with the lipid and the actives. But it's a unique drop tainer that prevents backflow and contamination, so you don't have to go and use single vials, which is great from a sustainability point of view.
Right. So in fact, a lot of the technology is in the bottle itself, right? So you're avoiding sort of what a lot of people these days really don't want, right? They don't want the waste of having to throw out those individual small bottles every time.
You know how humans are. They always want to do something that probably is against what you should be doing. It's in many ways our human nature to try and save something. But in this case, you're looking at, compromises of sterility. So it definitely adds value from the safety and quality of the product, which is what we always want to bring to the table for our patients.
Excellent. And the science hasn't slowed down. We mentioned over the past 20 years, it's really started to advance. But even in the last 2 or 3 years, there have been a few big studies that have come out that are very significant for clinicians. Maybe you could step us through a couple of them and tell us what's going on.
Yeah, we especially, of course, with Sustain Complete, we've done, our clinical work group has done a lot of great work on trying to figure out where we stand, not only in terms of short-term assessments of the value Sustain brings to a daily use, but also from a long-term use. And there's been 3 key studies, and one of them was by Craig and co-authors in the Ocular Surface Journal in 2021. And they examined a wide variety of patients who were treated with Sustain Complete. And this was in the preserved formulation. At that time, we had not come out with preservative-free. But the one important thing to note here is that what we found in this particular study was done over several months. And interestingly, patients with an evaporative component to their dry eye experienced improvement in their lipid layer grade with Sustain Complete. And I know you're showing here some essentially lipid layer colored fringe patterns, which show the differences post-treatment. And clearly, when they looked at the lipid layer interferometric patterns following the dosing in this long-term study, there was clear indication in the endpoints that there was a higher lipid layer grade, which indicated essentially that a thicker amorphous lipid layer pattern had formed, which is associated with enhanced tear film stability. So very important in this study over several months of use that this supports a long-lasting effect of the Sustain Complete. And, this is one of the first studies, that I've seen with one of our products that, first of all, we pushed out for many months, which is great because that's not easy to do. And not only did we push it out, but we opened it up such that after these several months of use, we were able to show that there was an enhancement in the tear film stability. And this is just wonderful news for a product like this, and goes back to that early science that was put in with Don Korb in terms of using a polar phospholipid in combination with the active propylene glycol to provide value for long-term benefits. So yeah, awesome study, and kudos to our clinical folks and the doctors that helped in this study.
Excellent. And I know that there was also another large study, and I can put it up right here to show people, that was done in 2020. Maybe you want to step us through this one as well.
Yeah, this was the daily, it's always interesting to, also think about that. If you just use one drop, what is the benefit of that? Here we're using, of course, an over-the-counter lubricant drop with the active propylene glycol. And here, after 4 and 8 hours, you see that there was enhancements of these clinical endpoints. And if we just walk through some of these, you can see that there was essentially these were patient-reported outcomes to assess the speed of onset and the length of efficacy of a single drop. So here, again, as I'm saying, is you're looking at a very, very quick study and the impact of it. And the dry eye symptom scores improved immediately. And that was not only after installation, but was sustained through 4 and 8 hours. On average, patients who had rated their symptoms as moderate or severe at baseline, a score of 6 to 10, just so everyone knows, on the visual analog scale, improved to ratings of mild or no symptoms, which is a 0 to 5 score on the visual analog scale at the time points evaluated. And overall, this data supported that patients can experience immediate symptom relief. And this may last up to 8 hours based on administration of a single drop of SYSTANE COMPLETE. So very powerful daily use and very powerful long-term use.
Yep, and the other final study that we have is by you. This one I found interesting because it covered all the different etiologies or types of dry eye, which I found really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and of course, when you think about the dry eye patients, it's in many ways a very complex population. And it's never just typically easily to be diagnosing a patient with aqueous deficiency only or evaporative only. And we know that meibomian gland dysfunction is in a large proportion of patients, but that may have a subset of aqueous deficiency. And essentially, in this particular study, we were looking at BID, which is twice daily dosing of SYSTANE COMPLETE in all these major subtypes, the aqueous deficient, evaporative, and the mixed. And after 14 days of use, the tear film breakup time and ocular discomfort improved from baseline for all dry eye types. So fortunately, we called SYSTANE COMPLETE, because essentially we were able to show across these different types, major types of dry eye, we were able to show improvement in the tear film breakup time and improve the ocular discomfort. So this is great supporting evidence of the use of SYSTANE in tear film stability and symptoms in patients with these major types of dry eye. Really, this really closed out really a wonderful study with both the short and long-term use of SYSTANE. And now we're showing with all these major types of dry eye patients, we have an opportunity with SYSTANE COMPLETE to add value to the practitioner's ability to provide a product for those patients when perhaps they may not know what they have or may be difficult. This is a product that they can provide as an offering.
Right. Well, and thank you for catching us up on the science, because I think one issue that everybody has is it's kind of overwhelming to know what to recommend, and particularly for a patient, if a patient's sort of flying solo on this and they're going and they see all these choices, right? They really have no idea. So I think it is very important for the clinician to be really up on the latest science so they can make a recommendation that makes sense.
Yeah, and you know, I think the one thing that doesn't get talked about is we have integrated in SYSTANE COMPLETE a true phospholipid in combination with the active propylene glycol. It's very unique because based on the work from Dr. Korb and the learnings from clinical studies of polar phospholipids and the DUCE-2 report, we have integrated into COMPLETE this science and this clinical understanding that adds value to this mixed population in dry eye, in these major types of dry eye patients. And so, I think it's important to get people to understand, when companies like Alcon invest in technology and put a lot of effort, not only in science, but the clinical side of things to support the value that the science is bringing. This really, is something to be proud of, not only for Alcon as a company, but for all the doctors, out there that are providing great care for their patients. This is a product that should be part of their wheelhouse to offer all the major types of dry eye patients because we have incorporated, the key aspects of the SYSTANE engine, the HP guar gelling technology, and now this polar phospholipid with the active demulsion. So wonderful journey, and I know that there's more journeys ahead.
Great. Well, Howard, thank you so much for being here today. It's not often we actually get to speak to the scientists behind the product. So again, thanks for coming in and doing this. And I'm sure the conversation will continue online.
It will. Thank you so much. And great to meet you, and happy to be back when possible to talk more about this great innovation portfolio.